Hi, I'm Veronica Wasek, and I help virtual bookkeeping pros to become confident professionals and business owners. In this video, I'm going to share with you the biggest and scariest QuickBooks cleanup horror stories. After doing hundreds of cleanups, I have seen it all. I've seen undeposited funds, uncategorized income, uncategorized expenses, unapplied income and expenses, reconciliation discrepancies, commingling. Like I said, I have seen it all. So I thought I would share with you the biggest cleanup horror stories that I've come across. Let's start with the tale of the multiple QuickBooks personalities. I had this client who came to me and they were using QuickBooks Desktop. This was a few years ago when I worked on QuickBooks Desktop. And unfortunately, they had an in-house bookkeeper who managed to embezzle $8 million. That's right, $8 million. When I started diagnosing the books, I realized that the bookkeeper not only kept one QuickBooks file, she actually had about 6 QuickBooks files in which she shuffled transactions around so that the business owners never really had any clarity into what was going on with the books. We learned that she was photoshopping the bank statements and giving the accountants falsified bank statements and also falsified financial records. As we dug deeper, we saw that she was writing checks to herself, her husband, and her friends, and then going back in QuickBooks and changing the vendor name and changing the account category to cost of goods sold. We ended up having to do a giant data migration project to combine the activity from all of the various QuickBooks files into one QuickBooks file, and then meticulously reconciling all the transactions and identifying all the fraud transactions. The bookkeeper is now in prison and serving time for her crime. Next, QuickBooks cleanup horror stories, the tale of the guns and snakes. I had this client who was a gun retailer, and I spent a lot of time working on their books. Unfortunately, I never had an engagement letter, and I never was clear on how much I was really charging them. Unfortunately, due to some disagreement in management, they ended up terminating my services and never paying me. If that wasn't bad enough, I was really scared to go and collect money from them because they sold guns. They had guns, they carried guns, and not only that, there was a snake that they kept as a pet. So it was a little too scary for me, so that was my cleanup horror stories with the guns and the snakes. It was best for me to walk away from that and move on, and I learned a very valuable lesson anyway about engagement letters and charging for my services up front. Next, cleanup horror stories, the tale of the unknown transactions. This was my very first cleanup client. And so, as I said, I worked on hundreds of cleanups and have seen it all. But at that point, I hadn't seen anything. And so I started working with this client and realized that there were all of these transactions on their books that we had no idea where they came from. And when we checked those transactions against their business bank statements, we couldn't find them. So I just kept asking the client, like, are you sure you don't have any other business accounts or any other source of business transactions? And she said no. So to this day, I still don't know how she got those transactions in there. I'm going to assume that they were probably personal transactions. For my first cleanup, it was really challenging, and especially trying to figure out what belonged on the books and what didn't. And my last QuickBooks cleanup horror story is the tale of the facepalm. So I had taken on my first cleanup client that I told you about. I worked so hard to clean up the books, and I was rushing because they had a deadline, and worked for many, many hours to get this cleanup done. And I was so excited to let their CPA know that their books were done. Unfortunately, I got an email a few hours later from the CPA pointing out this really big amount that I had miscategorized. I was so embarrassed because I had messed up. I was rushing so much to get it done that I didn't stop to just check my work one last time. After doing a facepalm and kicking myself, I learned a valuable lesson that was to use a cleanup checklist and to make sure that I went through the checklist from beginning to end and that I completed everything. I ended up putting together my QBO Colossal Cleanup Checklist. If you'd like to know more about it, then check the description below. I've linked that for you in the description. Have you come across some QuickBooks Online cleanup horror stories? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. I'm Veronica Wasek. Check the description below for all of my free resources, including my free Virtual Bookkeepers Toolbox, the link to join my Facebook community, and other resources on my online academy for bookkeepers. If this content is helping you, then subscribe to my channel, ring the bell, and give me a thumbs up. I'll see you next time.